When someone does work for you as an independent contractor, you'll need to send them a 1099 at the end of the year so they can report their income to the IRS. As a general guideline, if the contractor does the work of an employee, but they aren't an employee or a corporation, then you need to create a 1099 for them at the end of the year. If you have questions about whether you need to send a 1099, this guide can help. As always, your accountant is your best resource when you're in doubt. You can set up 1099 tracking the first time you pay your contractor. As you add the contractor as a vendor, check Track Payments for 1099 and enter their tax ID. For most independent contractors, this is probably their Social Security number. If you don't do this at first, you can always go back and do it later. When you enter a check, be sure to select an expense account that makes sense to you to help you track the contractor expense. Be sure to make a note of which expense account you use because you'll need to know this later. QuickBooks tracks this check and adds it to the contractor's 1099 when you create the form. One thing to remember, the expense may include payments to the contractor that should not appear on the 1099. For example, you could pay a vendor for work she did and equipment you rented from her. The payments for work should go on a 1099, but the equipment rental should not. To keep things separate, use a separate line for each expense and assign different accounts to each. Another thing to remember, if you pay the vendor with a credit or debit card, you don't need to send them a 1099. QuickBooks tracks credit cards automatically, so there's nothing you need to do. But if you pay a vendor with a debit card, be sure to enter debit as the reference number so QuickBooks knows not to track this payment for a 1099. At the end of the year, it's time to prepare 1099s for your contractors. Be sure all the vendors who should receive a 1099 get one. First, review your company details and make any changes. Now you need to assign the expense account you used to pay the contractor to an appropriate IRS-defined box. Most likely, you'll use the non-employee compensation box. Select the account you used when you paid your contractor. Remember when we told you to make a note of the account you used when creating the expense for this vendor? This is the same account you're assigning to an IRS box here. Select any accounts you used when creating expenses for vendors you're creating a 1099 for. Be sure you don't include any asset accounts, such as inventory. If you have any questions about assigning these accounts, check with your accountant. Look over your list of vendors and make any changes you need to. If you don't see vendors listed, you should get a 1099. Click Select 1099 Vendors and add them. Next, review the information that will go on the 1099. You can change the filter to a different year and other settings if you need to. After you've made any corrections on the preview, choose how you want to file the 1099 with the IRS. You can use Intuit's e-file option or print the 1099 information on a pre-printed form and mail it. Now you're ready to set up a contractor for 1099 tracking.